Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mildly Gothic. If you're new here, what I like to do is a variety of artsy content, and if you're not new, welcome back. How are you? Nice to see you again. So, what we're doing today is not the video I had originally planned. Not that I really had one planned, but this just kind of came out of nowhere, and I jumped on the opportunity to do something with it. So for Christmas, my boyfriend bought me the 9 mini Lego plants, not the succulents one. My parents got me that one for Christmas, but I also got the Lego, I'll put a picture of the kit on screen. It's really cute. It comes with 3 different sets of 3 different plants in 3 different categories, desert plants, carnivorous plants, and jungle tropical plants. And when I finished them, I was like, these are super, super cute. However, the little ones are like really small, and I was just like, they're gonna get lost on a desk. I'm gonna put them on a desk, I'm gonna put them somewhere, and they're just not going to stay together. They're not going to stay intact. I was afraid of them getting knocked over, lost. I don't know. But also, they're just a little cluttered. The succulents in their tray is a very solid, nice display piece. But these being all individual, I was like, these are kind of hard to display together. And then I had the idea, what if I made macrame hangers for my Lego plants? And so that's what we're doing today. This is a very long-winded intro for a very simple topic. I'm absolutely obsessed with how it came out. I did only end up doing 2 out of the 3 sets of 3 plants, and I'll explain why. Third one, probably gonna do eventually. I don't know if it'll be a video, but I just ran out of materials. So this was another one I was very much trying to do no purchase for it. I bought nothing extra for it other than the Lego. Everything else is just stuff I have on hand. And I do realize that the stuff I have on hand might be weird and not what other people just have on hand, but this is why you keep all of your scraps after crafting projects. You never know when it's going to be useful. But with this very long and unnecessary intro out of the way, let's get to making some macrame hangers. So as far as macrame goes, I've never done it before. Not unusual for this channel. And so I have a few different yarn types that I think might work. This one I think looks the most like what you might see from macrame, a little bit more like tweed. This is Lions Brand's Respect recycled polyester blend. I've used this before. It's actually quite nice. It's a little hard to work with because there's several fibers making up each one, but I like the color of this one. I also have much thinner but much brighter white, which I don't know if I really want, this yarn. And then I have what might be too thick is, this is the yarn, very close to the camera, good job. This is the yarn from my skeleton and rose sweater, my skull and rose sweater. This is what I used for the skulls. I'm afraid this is going to be too thick. I'm afraid this is too thin and too bright. So I think I might have just talked myself into using this yarn. This, if you're curious, is Karen Blossom Cakes in the color Yacht Club, because this is what a yacht club looks like. And this one is straw. Makes sense. But I think I've just talked myself into attempting to use this yarn because I think it's going to be the best weight with respect to the Lego weight, just meaning the thickness of the yarn, and also just the best color. I think the white might be a little overpowering. So now that I've talked myself into a yarn choice, I gotta figure out how to macrame. So this is another project where I wanted to use only materials that I had on hand. Luckily, I have a lot of yarn on hand, and I also have a lot of jewelry supplies. So I used these relatively large jump rings as kind of my anchor point for the yarn. I needed to use 8 strands total to make up the macrame base, and so I folded the yarn back and forth until I had 8 strands, cut one end, passed it through the hoop, and then tied it off so I now had a loop and my yarn connected to it. I then did a 4-strand braid for an amount of yarn. I don't know, there was nothing particularly special to the length that I did of this 4-string braid. Also, the way that I'm working with the ring is I threaded an extra piece of yarn through the ring across the back of the chair on the other side of the table and then tied it in place. So there's just a loop tied to the chair on the other side of the table, holding the ring in place so I could pull on it and work on it without it just slipping and sliding all over the place. So I did a 4-stranded braid for an amount of length, and then I tied a knot at the end before I actually got to the true macrame part. So the way macrame works is it's a series of basically knots at particular points in the yarn. And so the first thing that I needed to do was determine how tall the plant was, because and looking at macrame reference photos, I needed the first knot to sit at about the rim of the pot of the plant. That's about where I wanted the first knot to sit. Now, I did not measure these knots, and this yarn was a little stretchy, so, was it probably the best for this task? Not really, but it's also macrame for Legos, so I think it'll be okay. But I tried to make those first 4 knots all at about the same even space, and then what you do is you split each of those 2 yarns. So I say 4 knots because each knot contains 2 strands, and then you split those and tie basically at the bottom of where the pot will be. You tie the ones next to each other together. So you end up with a circle, and then you figure out about where the center of the bottom of the pot will be, and you tie all of them together. So there's 9 knots technically total. The first 4 that will sit where the rim of the pot lives, the next 4 using alternating strands that sits at the bottom of where the pot will be, and the one pulling it together in the center. And when it comes together, it kind of creates a basket. This was a lot of back and forth. You got to figure out how much open space you want to leave above the pot, and then how deep you want it to sit. But overall, it was actually a really easy structure to work out. I just did like the most basic kind of macrame you possibly can. If you look up designs online, you can do much more than just 4 pieces holding it up. You can do significantly more. You can probably figure out how to do it with less. You can do more intricate designs. I just wanted them to work, so I went with the most standard one that I could find online and reasonably figure out how to do. So this process, though, is about what I followed for the rest of them. I decided I was going to do 2 different macrame structures. I was going to do one with all of them vertically, and then I was going to do another with them tiered. So to start the vertical one, once I tied that knot off the first one, I did another section of the 4-strand braid and just worked that out until I had a nice separation between the 2, and then did a smaller macrame structure sized and scaled to the middle plant that I was going to use. And for this one, I decided to do large on top and small on the bottom. And then again, when the middle section was done, tied the knot, another braided section, and then continued with the hanger for the very last one, tied it off at the end, and cut a nice tassel to leave on. So that's honestly the hardest part of macrame, especially with these plants, was figuring out if I had enough vertical space for them and making sure that they didn't look too crowded or cluttered. Once I had the macrame section completed, I thought to myself, man, is that really enough to make a video? I mean, I guess I'm just going to hang it up with like a command hook now. And so I thought, no, I'm going to be extra and find all of the extra wood pieces that I have left over from when I made my hammer for my Mandalorian cosplay, and I'm going to hand saw those and hand sand those into a little wall mount so that I could hang my plants nicely out from the wall. So again, this is all stuff I had. I didn't want to buy anything else for this. So I measured about how far away from the wall the plants would need to be for them to hang comfortably and visually look nice. And then I planned to make a L joint with a angled cross piece connecting them. One for structural stability, because I don't know how strong super glue and command strips are for this stuff, and just 2 because I thought it was gonna look nice. So I just guesstimated. There wasn't a lot of real measuring that happened. I did bring a measuring tape out a few times, but I just kind of approximated the same distance along the wall as I did vertically out from the wall, a horizontal piece that would fit nicely in that gap, and used a hand saw. I have no power tools. I used a hand saw to cut it off at that point. I then also used sandpaper to make sure I sanded those edges down so that they were flat and that there were also no extra little wood splinters sticking off. And the way that I glued all of this together was super glue. I maybe have wood glue somewhere, but as far as glue that I know I had easily available, I used super glue. Please be very, very careful with super glue. It is very, very sticky. And very, very strong. So the way that I did this is I used painter's tape as kind of my protection. So I put a little bit of glue on the painter's tape and then completely wrapped that section in painter's tape. It only takes about 30 seconds for the glue to cure, meaning
set immediately where it is. It will still be tacky depending on the quantity that you placed, so you don't want to touch it for a while, but the painter's tape at least could hold it in place and keep my fingers away from the immediately sticky glue while it sat. And then a few minutes later, I came and removed the painter's tape and then set it out to dry further. I think I left it for a few hours before touching it and, being confident that I wasn't going to get glue all over myself. Would highly recommend. Please take caution with super glue. It is, not a substance to be messed with lightly. I did about the same process for the angled piece. I made sure that my edges were as straight and flat as I could get them, put super glue in those places, and then wrapped painter's tape around it to hold it in place while it quickly cured, and then propped it up to dry for a while after. Once everything was nice and dry, I used just a plain acrylic paint and I painted the entire thing black because I thought that would look much nicer. Also, it will match more of the furniture and just other frames and stuff that I have around the house. It's just going to work so much better and just look so much more elegant if it's black. Painted it black, let that dry, and then the last thing was making a hook for it. So again, I have a lot of jewelry supplies. I used to wire wrap basically every stone I ever came across. So I used that wire. I do not remember the gauge, but I did decide to use gold, meaning I had to swap out the jump ring at the very top to a gold one so that it would actually match aesthetically when I put it on the hook. But I decided to wrap that joint on the top between the straight bar and the angled one. I thought that would look nice aesthetically, and then made a hook come off of that. I did double up the wire for the hook because I wanted to make sure it was nice and strong. Again, it's only a few Legos, but I still didn't want to risk any weakness happening. There is no glue securing the hook in. It is just purely the tension of the wire and it being wrapped around the structure. And once that was all done, it was time to put it up. So to mount it, I just used the Velcro command strips. I used ones that were rated for like 16 pounds because that was like the lowest weight that the black one started at, and I wanted it to blend in with the wood. Once it was stuck to the wall, I just hung them up. So I decided that showing you how I made the macrame holders for the second structure is not very important because they're basically the exact same, just 3 separate ones this time instead of being all under one string. So they each have their own hook or jump ring at the top and are attached to that from there. So the structure that I wanted to make for this one was a centerpiece and then a bar across the top because I wanted to hang them in a little bit of a staggered fashion. And this rod is from a random mini garden tool that I got with a shelf. That is the genuine explanation. No, I don't have a better one. But I cut, sawed, and approximately eyeball measured all of the pieces, just as I did the previous one, and glued them in the exact same manner for the base L structure. Now the crossbeams where it gets a little bit different. The crossbeam had a cuff where the tool part was mounted, so I cut that off so that they were the same thickness all the way across, and then sanded that edge down. And to try to make it have some semblance of stability instead of just me sticking the crossbar on top, I tried to sand/saw, which is very hard to do when I only have my hand for sanding and a very unwieldy, weird hand saw, a notch into the top of the flat bar and also the crossbar, so that it would kind of like notch like a log cabin, if you've ever seen joints on a log cabin. So they'd kind of sit into each other a little bit, so there was space for the super glue to fill, and it was actually resting on something instead of the curvature of its side. It worked relatively well, except for the part that I didn't notice which side of the L bracket that I'd cut the notch into. Originally, I had done this one where I wanted the longer piece against the wall because I figured I would still have space. They were going to be staggered, so I didn't have to worry about, vertical space away from the wall as much. I wanted more of the bar against the wall to just kind of provide more leverage for it to lean against. That didn't entirely work. I don't think it matters. Legos do not weigh that much. So that is kind of what happened there. For these hangers, I did decide to use silver wire, and I did the hangers very much the same way, except not wrapped around any of the joints. I just made the hook and then from there wrapped the wire around the ends of the pieces that I wanted the hooks to come off of. So very straightforward. Once I did one, I had the other pretty much down. The only other unique part to this second one is I did not know the heights that I wanted these plants to hang at when I was making their initial hanger. So to compensate for that, I basically made little extenders. I made a section that was attached to a jump ring on both ends of a 4-strand braid that I could attach to the macrame holder and basically make it hang lower without really disrupting the look of the macrame. I considered doing just a chain, but I decided that the 4-strand braid extension kind of kept the feel of everything a little bit more. But once the L bracket was painted black, the hooks were made, it was time to put this one up as well. And I am just so incredibly happy with how both of these came out. They are the cutest little things that have brought a little bit of extra life into my room. And yes, there is another set of 3 of the Lego plants. I just ran out of random wood pieces that I could cut up to command strip to my wall. So there may be a part 2 to this video, or I'll just share what I end up doing, but I don't currently have any more cheap wood that I can sabotage to utilize for crafting purposes in this manner, so unfortunately the other 3 will just have to remain as cute little desk bobs and ends, because I do not have the means to hang them on my wall. But I sincerely hope you enjoyed watching me create these 2 little plant hangers, because I had an absolutely wonderful time making them, and they're kind of one of my favorite things in my space now, so maybe I'll inspire you to do something of your own. But with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.